Can you remember a time when Electronic Arts did not exist? Do you remember a time when it was a small company? Has it ever seemed like anything other than a massive organization? Well, I can't. As long as I can remember, they have been huge. But how huge? What exactly is the size of EA? Hi folks, it's Falcon. And today, gameranx asks the question, how big is Electronic Arts? So as far as gaming goes, Electronic Arts is pretty much synonymous with... You can't really talk about big games companies without talking about Electronic Arts. I mean, if you weren't intending to talk about specific companies, sure. But if you're mentioning anybody by name and don't mention them, what are you doing? But obviously everybody has to start somewhere. Nobody conquers the world the first time around, and everybody likes an underdog story, so here's one. Way back in 1982, Apple's director of product marketing, a fellow by the name of Trip Hawkins, met with a fellow named Don Valentine from Sequoia Capital because he wanted to talk about money, specifically money that would be used to start a new venture. MADDEN software. Don Valentine was so impressed by his ideas that he allowed old Trip to use a spare office in Sequoia Capital's building to start the company. So a couple months later, Trip Hawkins left Apple and incorporated a company with an initial personal investment of about $200,000. Now the name MADDEN software obviously didn't stick, and over a series of votes, they landed on
Electronic Arts.
Software artist was already taken, and literally within a couple of months, grew to have 11 employees and had secured $2 million in venture capital funding. Hawkins worked on his business plan for about 7 months, and over the next few years very quickly expanded the company. By its third year, it was an $18 million company. Throughout the 80s, EA published several games as well as non-games for the Amiga computer, including a flight simulator called FA-18 Interceptor, which was noted as an extremely advanced game due to its vector graph. Among its non-games, it published a piece of software called Deluxe Paint, which was actually one of the more advanced paint programs for the Amiga, and had it not been for the Amiga, EA probably would not be in the position that it is today. Now, as I said, by its third year, it had made $18 million, and that's also the same year that Deluxe Paint came out. 3 years after that, in 1988, was when FA-18 Interceptor came out. And around the same time, after 4 years of development, the very first Madden game hit. At the time, EA was actually not big enough to secure the NFL license and had to create fictional players and teams to publish the game. Nevertheless, it was very successful, and every single year they released a new version of it. In fact, they were doing so well they opened up a European headquarters, and by 1990 they began publishing console games. And to a lot of people that sounds like, oh, a downgrade, they went from PC to console. From a business perspective, a console game is much more alluring. For one, a console is specifically a gaming device, so people are looking for games for people also paid higher prices because the game typically worked better on a console than it would on a computer on account there was no variance in hardware whatsoever. They were a machine designed for a specific purpose, and they fulfilled that purpose better than a machine designed for many purposes. Today, gaming consoles are basically just computers. But back then, they were not. They had a reputation, they were seen as cool technology, at least in the circles that would buy games, which you want to go where the money is anyhow. And whether or not that was a deserved reputation, it doesn't matter. That's not how business works. And EA didn't become the huge company they are today by not caring about that. However, it requires a larger investment, as there's licensing requirements. At the time they used cartridges, which were much more expensive to produce than a floppy disk, and other various issues. Up until that point, they had simply been licensing their computer game properties to developers who made console games, but they had to have realized that there was money in it. And by 1993, EA was big enough in order to get that NFL license and renamed the series Madden NFL. They've continued to release it every year since. Remember how I said they started a European division? Well, in 1993, the European division also did something extremely notable for Electronic Arts. EA, an American company, didn't really care a whole lot about FIFA. Soccer or football, depending on where you live, whether it's the United States or literally any other country, just really isn't that big stateside. EA Europe had to poke and prod and nag and convince in order to get them to allow them to even develop FIFA at all. The team had to constantly re-justify what it was doing and convince them that even though the budget for the project was very small, that there was a reason not to cancel it. And that reason was, in Europe and the UK, people really wanted FIFA. And they wanted it for the same reason that people wanted Madden NFL in the United States. Except for it wasn't just the United States, it was also everywhere. Eventually they got their way, and the first time around, in 4 weeks, they sold 500,000 copies, which was 200,000 more than their original prediction of 300,000. The game was a runaway success, and to this day, is their biggest franchise. 2 years later, in 1997, they bought Maxis, the creators of SimCity and various other simulator games, and they bought it for $125 million. A year later, in 98, for a similar amount of money, $122 million, they bought Westwood Studios, creators of Command & Conquer and Dune. In the year 2000, Trip Hawkins had apparently made more money than anyone could ever need and retired, and Larry Probst took over. But it didn't stop growing then. 2 years later was EA's first Battlefield game. It sold so well they bought the developer Digital Illusions in 2004, which had by that time rebranded to the name DICE. That same year they bought 20% of Ubisoft, purchased Mythic Entertainment, which had just finished making Warhammer Online, and secured deals to lock Sega out of the ESPN name, which they had actually edged in a little bit on Madden NFL, by creating ESPN NFL 2K5. In 2007, they decided to reorganize to a different business model, which is known as the city-state model, with the intention of keeping separate company culture for all of their various studios, which was somewhat of a reversal from how they were doing things, which was essentially an acquisition, consolidation, and assimilation model. With individual studios acting a little more autonomously, it allowed them to retain more of a sense of independence and encourage creativity. That same year, they bought Supercomputer International, a company that specialized in game server hosting, and VG Holding Corporation, which was the parent company of BioWare and Pandemic. In 2009, they merged BioWare and Mythic into a single RPG and MMO studio, and acquired social casual game developer Playfish Interactive, a purchase they made for $275 million. In 2011, they bought PopCap Games for around $1.3 billion. The deal started at $750 million and included any earnout from that calendar year, and a year later attempted to buy Valve for a straight price of $1 billion. Presumably, they were going to negotiate higher than that with earnout, the same as PopCap, but it didn't get that far, the deal fell through. But attempting to pick up companies for $1 billion+ is not insignificant. In April 2013, EA reorganized and dismissed about 10% of its workforce, though not for lack of money, because what they did the following month is pretty big. In May 2013, EA partnered with Disney to be the exclusive creator of Star Wars games for the next decade. Don't tell me that's not an expensive licensing deal. In 2015, EA created a new division called the Competitive Gaming Division that focuses entirely on esports events to tap into a market that this year is worth almost $500 million and is expected to surpass $1 billion by a fair amount in the next couple years. In the year 2015, EA brought in $4.3 billion, more than half of it from digital. That means more than half of that money they did not have to create a physical product, they did not have to warehouse it, they did not have to ship it, they did not have to sell it to a retailer. It went direct to the customer, which means a lot of people know specifically about Electronic Arts games. Whether that's for quality or a damn near limitless advertising budget, it's really up to you. The first quarter of this year, over 77% of its revenue was from digital sales. For a company that makes several $1 billion a year, the name recognition necessary to have that many people interested into your titles directly is impressive to say the very least. How big is it? You know those annoying Forever 21 stores that are literally everywhere? They make roughly the same amount of money as EA. And they have to make sure that people like them. EA doesn't have to do that. EA's various developers, DICE, BioWare, etc., they have popular names. We like their stuff. And then EA adds their business model to them. And some of why people hate EA is valid. Some of it might be a little overblown. But literally every person on the planet could hate EA, and they wouldn't go away in any of our lifetimes. Because to call them well-funded and huge is essentially understatement of the year. What do you think of EA? No, really, I really want to know what you think of EA. Because in some respects, what they have done is a massive achievement for gaming, and in some, it's a huge affront. Let's hear about that in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, click like, and if you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every single day of the week. And as always, we thank you very much for watching this one. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter @FalconTheHero. And we'll see you next time right here on gameranx.